You're listening to the Endocast, a podcast about all things endometriosis, with your hosts, Britt Thelman-Pangrel and Dr. Eric Heegard. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Endocast. I'm Britt, and I'm joined by the illustrious, today, Dr.
Thank you, Britt.
Eric Heegard.
It is I, Britt.
I love it.
The illustrious. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here, as always, with you and talking about something we both care about so passionately.
Yes. And today we are going to talk about our love of food.
Yes.
No, not really. We're not going to talk about just our love of food. We're going to talk about the complexity that is endometriosis and food.
Food, diet, etc. Yep.
And I think this goes back to just our general theme of the whole show is that, endo is a chronic illness.
Yep.
There is no cure. There's no magic pill. You are an amazing, talented surgeon and a specialist. But we all know that surgery isn't the only piece of the puzzle.
Well, a friend of mine and someone you know very well, Dr. Matt Palmer, I love, he actually said something at a meeting we were at together, which I thought, I'm going to steal that.
Do it.
Which is, he said, he talks to his patients about surgery as being the start of things.
Oh.
The first step, because you have to approach endometriosis, and oftentimes it just gets lumped into the whole idea of pelvic pain or pain syndrome as being, I think, a multi-front attack.
Yeah.
So you want to be able to surgically cut out the disease that you see. Mm-hmm. But for many people, that's not enough. And you need to kind of approach managing pain and the chronicity of endometriosis using things like, working with pain specialists, working with dietitians, nutritionists, pelvic floor physical therapists, other mind-body kind of complementary sort of supplements. And so the whole idea of surgery just being one part of this is, I think, important to kind of emphasize to people. And one aspect of managing this condition and many others is what we eat.
I agree. I think, you kind of you hit the nail on the head.
Did I really?
I agree. Yeah, I think you did. Because, and that's progressive of you as a Western medicine doctor
Thank you.
to take this holistic approach. But I think that's how endometriosis works. I'm reading the book right now, Beating Endo, fabulous new book. And in there, they talk a lot about how endo can't just be managed with, strictly with medicine, that the patient really needs to get involved in their own care. And that's the whole goal of this podcast, right? Is to empower our listeners, empower our endo warriors to take control of their lives and their bodies. And food, I don't want to say is an easy way to do it, but food is a way for you to really make an impact in how you feel directly.
Yep.
That doesn't require a lot of outside help.
Right.
So I've worked personally with Kim Plessel.
Mm-hmm.
She's the dietitian. I know you met her at the Endo March.
Yep.
She's the dietitian with Oakdale OBGYN, and I met with her one-on-one. And you can meet with a dietitian or not. I think it was really helpful for me because she helped me go through all these different kinds of foods, helped me pinpoint what I liked and didn't like. And then she helped give me recipes and ideas. And we talked about like an elimination diet and things like that. So, that stuff really helped me. I'm sure a lot of people listening have done an elimination diet, but that's where you start with a restricted diet and you kind of cut back on a lot of things. So you remove alcohol, caffeine, dairy, gluten, red meat, nuts, legumes, which, did you know peanuts are a legume in the bean family? They're not in the nut family, technically.
I think I did know that.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to say.
Well, you're a doctor. You should.
I'm going to just say for this morning that I did know that.
Yeah. So you kind of restrict. I would say people go to that Whole30 diet, right, where you're eating really whole foods.
Yep.
And you see how your body feels, and then you slowly add one food group back in.
Right.
So you're doing Whole30, and then maybe you got to do that for I want to say almost 30 days to really get that gut check in place. And then you go and you add a food group in. So maybe you add dairy in. And then you listen to your body and you're like, okay, how is this feeling? How
Yep.
are my bowels feeling? How is my pain?
Right.
And then if dairy's going well, then you're like, okay, I check that off my list. I'm good with dairy. Then you
That's right.
add in gluten, right? Or wheat, and you see how you feel with that. Or you add in caffeine. And that's been a really helpful way for a lot of people. Now, that being said, that's hard. You got to do a lot of grocery shopping.
Yes, and I think the other thing I wanted to just bring into the conversation, which I just think is intellectually interesting, because, and I know that's a hard thing for me to say, because it's always interesting if it's happening to somebody else, right?
Sure.
If it's happening to you, it's not interesting. It's because you're in it. But I think one thing I want to just kind of throw out for all of us to think about is the idea of why. Why does what we eat affect endometriosis?
Yeah.
Because this is what's kind of fascinating about the disease, and I think it kind of breaks into two questions. One is there anything we can do from a dietary standpoint to prevent it?
Oh.
And number two, if you have it, is there anything you can do to manage your symptoms?
Right.
And the first question is, there's a lot of it's more speculation.
Sure.
Because there's things that certainly people with endometriosis have been found to have lower amounts of things like vitamin A, vitamin C, and that sort of thing. But it's very hard to make suggestions that, if you did this or that, you wouldn't get endometriosis. And I think, and that's not clear, and probably the reality is it doesn't.
Well, I think from a medical perspective, and tell me about this, but food has so much to do with our thyroid and hormone production,
Right.
and hormone regulation.
Precisely.
And endometriosis is
It's
all about
hormone driven.
hormones and excess of estrogen. Am I
Right.
correct?
Yeah.
So it would make sense that if there are foods that affect our hormone regulation, things like alcohol, caffeine, gluten, red meat, saturated and trans fat foods, that would play a part.
That's right. And it comes back to one of the things that we're talking about with a lot of diseases, including endometriosis, which is inflammation.
Yes.
And so everything that you're talking about in terms of diet is designed to be anti-inflammatory. And if you talk about what's happening with endometriosis, which is that for it to exist and persist, you have this process where you have the lesion, whatever you want to call the endometriosis entity.
Yeah.
It attaches or grows. It creates localized acute inflammation, and that inflammation kind of creates this domino effect of allowing new blood vessel growth to the area, new nerve growth, and that sort of thing, and creates this environment in the abdomen, which is an inflammatory microenvironment, and that's what we're trying to impact when we're eating.
And the foods that I just mentioned, or those substances, are inflammatory.
Right. Precisely.
So if we can reduce that and focus, like I said, on the Whole30 thing,
Yep.
that's a really low inflammation diet. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I would love to know if you can prevent endometriosis with diet, but I'd also like to know if you can prevent cancer with your diet and all these other diseases.
Well, I think that it comes down. I think what you're circling around is the whole idea that, number one, we don't know, but I think everybody's circling around this kind of unified theory,
yeah,
which is that there's an inflammatory aspect to all these different conditions.
right.
And that by eating certain ways, avoiding the things you're talking about and promoting some of the other things, we can hopefully decrease at least the inflammatory step or minimize the inflammation of what's going on and contributing to what's happening.
No, for sure. So that was your first part, was about
Well, about can we prevent it?
prevent it. Yeah.
And I think nobody knows. And probably what we eat is probably not going to prevent it from happening.
Right.
Could it
There's a
delay it?
genetic element.
Exactly. There's an immune system aspect. There's an environmental aspect to it. There's epigenetic aspects to it. familial. Now, can it keep it from the disease from being exacerbated or proliferating, getting worse? Well, I think that there's reasons to suspect that we can manage and decrease the inflammatory step that is kind of exacerbating everything that's happening in there.
Right.
And I think that the answer is yes to
Well,
that to a certain extent.
And we've talked a lot about, in different episodes, this idea of endo and.
Yes.
You don't usually, not a lot of people just have endo. You know, they might have other things, whether it be something as simple as seasonal allergies,
Right.
or something as complicated as POTS, or fibromyalgia, or, you know, different chronic illnesses and Hashimoto's disease.
Yep.
Different things. And I think the endo and really speaks to endo and diet as well.
Yes.
Because of that inflammation element that we're discussing.
Well, and also, you know, it's been pretty well shown. I'm hesitating to say that with great, that, you know, they've done studies where they've looked at people with endometriosis and people who don't have it.
Yeah.
And definitely there is an aspect, you know, people with endometriosis tend, you know, they tend to have more dietary fat and red meat, which we all know is inflammatory.
Right.
As opposed to, you know, people who don't. And so, but it's all very murky. It's all very murky.
It's not an exact science.
No.
I would also say that endo and goes into, sometimes people can be commonly misdiagnosed with IBS when they have endometriosis.
Yes.
And personally, a lot of my symptoms were around bowel issues. And that was one of the biggest things that brought me into the doctor, aside from painful sex and infertility, was pain when I was trying to do a number 2. I mean, and just being constipated in general. And I knew I felt better when I removed gluten. I passed the dairy test, thank God, because cheese is like my favorite. But I knew I felt better when I got rid of gluten, and a lot of my bowel symptoms got better.
Yep.
But the endo was growing and impacting my colon, so it's like no wonder that was an issue.
Right. Yeah, and you know, you can, you know, by decreasing gluten for you, you decrease the inflammation of what was happening, but that's not making it go away.
Correct.
It's helping control it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think that, you know, and we've talked about this before, but you know when you're dealing with something that is chronic, and this is, I want to actually, I'm going to wrap this up in a little bow, but it just makes me think of something you said before, which is, you know, when you look, I think if you say that, if you run into somebody who says, I'm going to cut this out and you're going to be done, and it's, you know, you're going to be
a surgeon,
yeah,
like if they were to say this to you.
Yeah, you know, just say that that's it and you're going to feel great and the disease is gone. I think it's sort of, if you deal with people with this condition for long enough, you know that it is a chronic inflammatory
whole
condition.
Body disease,
and why we're talking about this, you got to go at it from different angles. And so I think it's just important to be alert to that sort of thing, because we have to, as part of this, decrease the inflammation and the environmental aspect of what's going on. And so the gluten for you decreased inflammation and helped with your symptoms. And when we're talking about endometriosis, my approach at least is, what is our goal? Is it pain? Is it fertility? Is it both? And so, you know, for you were dealing with two things. You were dealing with pain and fertility issues. And so, you know, you had to kind of look at something that was a process or treatment that addressed both.
Yep.
But you could have somebody, for example, who has endometriosis, and if they have bowel related issues, and you change your diet, and then and all of a sudden their life is manageable because of that, you don't necessarily need to operate on them.
Right.
You know, and so.
But I would say, to that extent, diet's harder than surgery.
Yeah, it is.
Lifestyle changes are a lot
absolutely.
harder. So if you're someone who's listening and you're struggling with that, and that's frustrating to hear,
Yeah.
because I think that would be really frustrating for me to hear if I was someone who struggles with diet. I mean, food has such a we as humans have a very interesting, and personally as a woman, I have a very interesting relationship with food, especially as someone who's competed in pageants and struggled with my weight and body image issues. Food is more than just
nutrition.
Yeah. There is a lot that gets packed into food, and when you bring in your emotions and your mental stability and social media into the whole equation, food's a hard one. Surgery is easier.
Yeah.
If you can get your insurance to cover it, if you got someone to drive you there and you've got a recovery plan, surgery feels a little bit more like a magic bullet.
Yeah.
Food's harder. Food is
that's
an emotional
that's a
relationship.
That's a chronic aspect of a chronic disease.
Yeah. I mean, very much so. And I think that that's what makes endo so unfun. I can't think of a better word, but because surgery is easy, taking a pill is easy, birth control, if you're doing Oralissa or anything like that, those can be easier solutions.
Yep.
But changing the way you eat has so many other implications. I mean, socially alone, it can make it more difficult.
Absolutely.
And financially, people think it can be more expensive. Time-wise, you've got to be thinking in advance and preparing.
And prepping, yeah.
So,
and, the reality is it is more expensive.
Yeah.
It is more expensive to eat healthfully than it is to eat unhealthfully.
Well, I'm not going to get in that argument with you because I think there are several people who feel like if you do it the right way, it doesn't have to be more expensive, but I think it's more time consuming.
Yeah, I was going to add that aspect in.
Yeah.
Yes, perhaps you're right.
Planning in advance.
Okay, let's see if we can agree on this though.
Okay.
If that it is less expensive and less time consuming to eat unhealthily.
Yes, a combination.
Yes,
I would agree.
Well, so the unified theory, the mathematical equation, time plus expense is lower.
And the cost of your time.
Ooh, that is. Now we're going to have to do some sort of parenthetical thing like,
But so when you're talking about managing endometriosis as, from a holistic approach, surgery, birth control, Oralissa, these other medical options, those are the easy ones.
Yeah.
Food is a hard one.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of commitment, and surgery is easier, and I'm doing air quotes, in the sense that you make your plan, you have your pre-op appointment, you go, you have the surgery, then you recover. Your recovery lasts, we've talked about this, but anywhere from a few weeks to a few months, and then you're recovered, right? Your body is done. Food is different. You test things out. It takes weeks, months.
Yeah, months.
To see changes in your gut health, to see changes in your body, to feel those changes physically in your mind, just like your mental clarity. So it's just like if you're trying to change your diet to lose weight, it took you more than a week to put on those 30 pounds. It's definitely going to take you more than a week to get them off.
And to do it it in a healthy, sustainable way.
And to commit to that. And I think it can be even harder when you're struggling with a chronic illness and you're trying to manage your symptoms with food, especially when your chronic illness is cyclical.
Yeah.
Because you might be feeling great, and then all of a sudden you get your period and you're like, oh my God, I was doing so well and my diet was so clean, and I'm feeling like crap again. What happened?
Well, this just goes to, this is why I think that people have to be forgiving of themselves. Because this is, I think, I'm not a very profound person, but I think this is one thing that I came up with on my own that I'm going to just claim.
Okay.
Which I think is that we are all just souls floating in neurotransmitters and hormones. We can take any person who thinks that they don't have any.
I don't even know what that means.
Well, I'll explain it. Maybe you don't understand. You don't know what it means because maybe it doesn't mean anything. Maybe it's nonsensical. But you can take. I'm just telling you. You could take anybody who thinks, I don't have any issues. I don't struggle with this. You mess with their hormones and you mess with the neurotransmitters that are going to their brain, norepinephrine, serotonin. You could take what somebody might define as being neurotypical or normal, and you could make them a lunatic if you mess with that stuff. And so what you're describing is cyclical changes in a woman's hormones, and to expect that you're just going to, if your hormonal, I love this word, milieu, sort of like pamplemousse. It's French. Milieu means the hormonal environment. I don't know. Why did I say that, Britt? It just seemed like such a great word.
You love words.
I do. I love words. But the, if you take the environment if you take your brain and your body and you change the hormonal or neurotransmitter environment, you're going to be different.
Yeah.
You're going to respond differently.
Yeah.
And so in a cyclical situation where you're ovulating, you are going to feel differently at different times of your cycle.
And I would say that's where diet has really come into play for me. If I cheat and I eat a lot of gluten or a lot of soy, which has phytoestrogens.
Yep.
I might be saying that wrong. I'm not a dietitian, just for the record.
I am not. I think it's I think they pronounce it phytoestrogens, but I don't know.
Okay, well, either way, if I eat those things or indulge in some of that stuff, I might not feel, that's the other thing with diet. I don't feel bad right away. I don't have celiac disease, so I don't have like a big stomach blowout or a big issue, but it builds up in my system. And when it comes time for ovulation or for my period, I struggle. My cramps are so much worse. The headaches, I would get migraines.
That's rough.
The back pain and the bowel stuff. And it wasn't instant. So that's what's so hard about food too. With surgery and with some of these, medical options like the drugs, you can feel better a lot faster.
Yep.
And you don't necessarily feel worse if you stop taking something.
Right.
You do feel worse usually right away if you stop taking something. But food is different. You don't feel better right away, but you also don't feel worse right away. So if you start sabotaging yourself, you're going to pay for it later.
Right.
And to your point, I would agree. That's why I like to say anything you can do, I can do bleeding, because I have a lot of hormones raging.
That is just like that. That's like
not
the
to go
best.
on my feminist
Did that?
here.
Did you come up with that?
No,
or
I did not. I'm not going to take credit for it.
That is like the greatest thing I've heard in a long time.
Oh,
That should be a T-shirt.
yeah, I think it probably is.
Oh my God, that's great.
But women, people who have female hormones and female genitalia, we like to say people with periods, are dealing with a lot of hormonal changes each month. And I'm not going to discount anyone who might be gendered male or have mental illness that, might be triggering hormonal issues and things as well. But there's so much that you're dealing with. And if food can help you kind of lighten the load just a little by regulating your hormones,
Yep.
I'm telling you, I am a different person when I avoid high amounts of caffeine, gluten, and soy. That's been my magic bullet.
And I think, don't you think that everybody needs to, and people as they go through their life will realize what oftentimes those triggers are. For you, that's it.
Yes. That's it for me. I know, for some people it's dairy. Dairy really messes with them. Dairy and poop have a very complex relationship. But I think, if your brain
we got to do a show on that.
I know, right?
That stuff is fascinating.
If your brain gets foggy, though, when you're eating things like this, you can't function well either. Right. And I also think people deal with alcohol in that way, which can be really hard and socially so difficult. That's the other hard part about food and alcohol is, sometimes alcohol, and I've talked about this before, it was one of my main coping tools when I was in a lot of pain. It would ease my pain and it would check me out and it would relax me and I could sleep and all of that stuff. Now, I didn't abuse alcohol in the sense that I needed it to sleep or I needed it to function. But I'm not saying that it couldn't have gone down that path if I hadn't found, my excision expert and had surgery.
Dr. Matt Palmer.
Yeah. And it probably wouldn't have helped me get pregnant, and it probably would be really hard for me to be pregnant right now and, be dependent on that drug. But for some people, alcohol does the exact opposite, and it causes migraines, and it really inflames their body, and everyone has different reactions to it. And I think from a social perspective, just like saying that you're vegan or you're gluten-free and you can't have something at happy hour with your coworkers or with your friends or at book club.
Vodka's doesn't have any gluten in it, does it?
It depends on which ones you do.
Really?
But there's potato vodka.
Okay, how about bourbon?
A lot of that stuff is distilled from wheat.
Oh, okay. There's a lot to think about.
There is, but wine is usually a pretty safe bet, which was my go-to.
Okay. Well,
That was
okay.
my drug of choice, was red
Okay.
wine.
Okay.
But I'm just saying that stuff can be really difficult,
Right.
especially if you've used food as a coping mechanism.
Yep.
You know, we talk about the emotional side of food, and if you're in pain, there's a comfort around mac and
Absolutely.
cheese or
Oh, yeah.
your grandma's stuffing recipe at Thanksgiving. But it's like, is the emotional comfort worth the physical discomfort later?
So, may I say something?
Of course.
Thank you. Which is that I just want to bring this out, which is I think that what you're saying is what a lot of people say, and what I say to myself is that I think you're being too hard on yourself in a sense of the idea of comforting yourself with food.
Okay.
You know, because everybody does that. Everybody, and food is this, and you were talking about this at the beginning of this episode, which is how complex it is.
Yeah.
Because food is a wonderful, joyous, comforting aspect of what we do, and it's so deep and hardwired into who we are from the moment we are born. Whatever culture you're in, the food choices and the structure
Your
of
food is your relationship with your mother when you're born. Sometimes, I mean,
precisely, and your relationship with hopefully people who are comforting and caring for
Right.
you, and it's all associated with that. And so I think it's important just to realize that anybody listening is not weird because you find comfort in food.
oh, definitely not.
We're designed that way.
Right.
And so one thing is, I just think you're bringing in this very important aspect of kind of being, I think, thoughtful and deliberate about what you eat and when you eat. But also, I try to tell people, just we are humans, and and this is a wonderful aspect of life that we need to embrace and just hopefully. So may I do this?
I like that you said that.
Well, I love to eat, and I want to eat some of the recipes that you were making that we're
For
talking
sure.
about in one of our other episodes. But may I make a few kind of specific suggestions on
Yes, please.
diet? And
Please, Dr. Hegard, get doctory on us.
I'm not sure if I'm going to get that doctory, but there is some evidence to suggest what I'm going to suggest, which is vegetables. Dark. I know everybody hates. No, I should. But you want to get 4 to 5 servings a day of some vegetables, and ideally things that are dark leafy greens. Spinach, collard greens, kale, chard, Swiss chard, I guess it is, broccoli, cabbage. That's carrots, beets, onions, peas, squash,
Brussels
etc.
sprouts.
Brussels sprouts. So, and why is it that vegetables are rich in what are called carotenoids and flavonoids, and these are antioxidant and anti-inflammatory. And we talked about the whole inflammatory aspect. These things we want to get, and we want to nail the inflammatory aspect of endometriosis and other things. They are rich in vitamins A, E, and C. And there have been studies that, as we talked about before, that show that people with endometriosis oftentimes are a little bit lower in that.
Yeah.
Fruits. Okay, I'm telling you what everybody knows. We should be eating more,
Fruits and vegetables.
fruits and vegetables. But a couple.
Isn't that true with diet though? We already know
Everywhere.
everything we need to know.
I know, but
sometimes you just need your friend Dr. Hegard to tell you.
Well,
it
I'm
again.
just, what I'm telling myself this, and I need to lose some weight, right? I was at.
I'm not going to agree with you on that.
No, I'm not asking you. I'm not. I'm pretty brutal with myself about myself. But I was at Dunn Brothers this morning, which, if you're in this area, is a great coffee place. And man, they had these wonderful lemon pastries. Man, I wolfed. It was like a one bite inhalation. It was so good. And I know
so
that.
you're saying you cheat?
Oh God. And so we all know what we're supposed to do, but we can add on to, the stuff that we're cheating on, a couple servings of vegetables. Why? Because fruits are rich in the same thing, carotenoids and flavonoids, antioxidant, anti-inflammation. And it goes back to the same thing. There's evidence that people with endometriosis, for whatever reason, are a little bit lower in vitamin A, E, and C.
Yeah.
Fish and seafood. 3 to 5 servings a week.
That's hard for me.
Yeah, and some people just don't like fish, whatever. But salmon, herring.
I love salmon.
Does anybody like herring?
I don't know.
I don't.
I've only ever heard of pickled herring, but we're in the Midwest where everyone likes to pickle things.
Yeah, we're not in Finland. Or sardines, black cod. Why? Fish are rich in omega-3s.
Yeah.
Which omega-3 fatty acids are anti-inflammatory. It sort of makes sense. Lean meat, poultry and eggs, 3 to 5 servings a week. Why? Because this is going to kill me, but high quality skinless.
I'm not a big skin person, but if you need iron, the dietitian was telling me that chicken thighs have more iron.
Yeah. Well, you can take off the skin off those chicken thighs.
Can take it off.
I would never do it, but because they have a lot of that these lean meats have less saturated fat.
Right.
Beans and legumes. You like legumes? They're rich in folic acid, magnesium, and potassium. They have more fiber, which decreases blood sugar. You want to limit your red meat because this has been shown to decrease inflammation. And then oils, healthy oils like virgin olive oil, vegetable oil, canola oil, flaxseed. And these are anti-inflammatory. Nuts and seeds, whole grains, low-fat dairy. Limit your alcohol, caffeine, processed foods, etc., and drink a lot of water.
So basically, just do all the things
that we know
you always know you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
That brings up a good point. I think that a lot of, managing endo and managing your diet is hard, number one. So cut yourself some slack. Number two, my phrase that I like to say is I like to pick my inflammation.
Right.
Legit. That's what I like to say. So dairy, that's going to be one that I'm non-negotiable about. Red
Are you
meat,
a blue cheese person?
I've never met a cheese I don't like.
I am trying to think. There was one really stinky, sweat sock cheese that it was like Limburger. I think that was hard for me. You have that?
I mean, that's not at home currently, but I'm sure I have.
It's like taking an old sock and sticking it in your mouth.
Okay.
But other than that,
you're on board with cheese.
Oh man, blue cheese.
But yeah, I like to pick my inflammation. The other thing I would say is,
I love it.
Balancing out your plate is important. And the last piece of the puzzle, I think, is if you're not getting this stuff from your diet, you need to be working with your doctor or a dietitian on maybe how you can supplement that. Because that's also really helped me.
Well, I don't know if you, but things like, fish oil, omega-3, that sort of thing.
There's some great fish oils on the market. I really like the brand Nordic Naturals. That's really helped me. They have a prenatal fish oil that I take currently. But I found that that's helped a lot.
Made from pregnant fish?
No. I don't think so.
That's sick.
Probiotics.
Yep.
Good gut stuff. So especially like if you've really indulged, in Minnesota we have the state fair here and there's lots of indulgent foods or
lots of inflammation there.
Around the holidays you're doing a lot of indulging. Make sure you're getting those probiotics and those omega-3s. I'm not a big fish person, so I have to make sure I take that fish oil. Obviously the best way to digest these vitamins is through food, but people don't get enough of them. So magnesium is another really big one that the dietitian has recommended, vitamin D. And then another, I think, when you're picking, if you're going to eat out, for example, I try to pick something where I know I can go somewhere where they have lots of gluten-free, soy-free options, and anti-inflammatory foods are part of the menu too. So I would say curries and Indian food is great for me because it has a lot of turmeric. And turmeric is very anti-inflammatory. And I drink a lot of turmeric and ginger tea. Mm-hmm. And that, if you can hear it, I have a bit of a cold right now, so I've been drinking a lot of it lately.
Yep.
That stuff is really helpful. So if you are going to indulge and pick your inflammation and you maybe overindulged in cheese or gluten or red meat or alcohol or caffeine and you want to counterbalance that, yes, load up on your veggies, colorful plates, as they like to say. Yep. But then don't forget about these other options that you have to supplement your diet.
Right. And I think one of the things you talked about early in this episode was the idea of doing an elimination diet, which is if you get online, you can get a lot of information on, basically we're talking about an inflammatory diet.
Right.
And there's an endometriosis diet. There's all these anti-inflammatory.
It's just like a not fun diet. It's
Yeah,
like all the not fun, all the fun things. Just
what I
remove
usually
them.
tell people is just think about everything that makes life worth living and don't eat that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
But we don't want you to feel that way.
I'm kidding, but it is really restrictive. But there's a lot of information out there about different types of what we call elimination diets, which is, basically you get yourself completely clean, and then, as you were talking about, Britt, maybe add on gluten for a while and see if that's a trigger.
Yeah.
And these are things you can work on yourself without necessarily, if you're in an area that maybe it's not easy to find a dietitian or nutritionist. It's out there, and you can do this work yourself. And for some people, it might be that you could pretty much eat anything except for blank and control your symptoms. And this is just part of the battle. Not the thing necessarily, but part of it. And something we can do.
And I think, as someone who struggled with endo and pain and managing this disease, it can feel like a lot of things are out of your control.
Right.
And it's really overwhelming. But if there's one piece of the puzzle that you can take into control, and that might be, for me, it's gluten. So if I can control that, that feels good. I feel like I'm making a contribution to my health, and it's something that I can manage. I think food can also be a powerful way for you to kind of take control back of your disease and how you're feeling in your body. And I would also like to say, yes, it does require more planning when you're changing your diet. It can be more expensive. It for sure takes more time. But it's easier than it's ever been.
Yeah.
I would put that out there. I was just in London this summer for our baby moon. It was so fun.
And through Iceland, wasn't it?
Yeah. And both places, it was actually not that difficult to find gluten-free options. In fact, everywhere had vegan options on the menu and vegetarian options highlighted. And a lot of places had gluten called out. And then what I found in London in particular, which I hope that more cities in the United States catch on to, is they just ask you. After you've given your order, they ask you, do you have any allergies or dietary restrictions that we should be aware of?
After you order? Wouldn't it be better to say before?
I don't disagree, but I just think the fact that they're asking
Those
in
British,
general.
They're always just trying to exit the union, or they're just complicating how we eat.
I'm just saying.
Why would they do that? Well, it's like, after you make the incision, is this the surgery you want?
Well, right now, no one in the United States is asking me that question.
So
I'm saying
you
at least
appreciate
they're
their
asking.
asking.
Yeah.
Whether it's, it's like being pregnant and then somebody saying, what would you like for birth control?
Yeah, right. No, I appreciate them asking the question.
Okay.
And
Granted, understood, agreed.
And there are some great apps out there too. So, for one, I really like the app Gluten Free Find Me. It's an app on that you can use on the iPhone, and it's got reviews from different people who have celiac disease or who have gluten allergies. So that can really help when we're traveling, or even here at home when I want to find a restaurant or an option. And I think that there are a lot of different groups on social media that can help you find that stuff too. So utilize social media, utilize these groups. I know Nancy in Nancy's Nook has some articles on food, diet, and kind of the scientific correlation between how these things work, but then also some suggestions for you. Yeah. And there's some great books, like we've talked about, Beating Endo. They talk a lot about diet and the role that plays for you. And then working with a dietitian, I think, could be so helpful. Yeah. Helping you kind of target and pinpoint, okay, for me personally, this is my goal. I'm not saying that gluten's going to be the end-all answer for everybody, but for me, that's really helped.
Yeah. Find out what works for you.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for talking about diet today with me, Dr. Heegard. Now we both need to go eat leafy greens.
Yeah, I'm going to have a donut first. This is just I like the push me, kind of pull you sort of thing where I increase inflammation and I slam it down.
It makes you feel like you've accomplished something.
Right, exactly.
I love it. Well, thanks so much, you guys. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much for listening. Be sure to connect with us on Facebook at facebook.com/The Endocast. Our theme song is Renegade Energy by Tacky Annie. This is a Matriarch digital media production. Learn more about Matriarch and check out all their great podcasts at matriarchdm.com.